I'm tired.
The Late Morning Program with Nam Ras Podcast.
Hare Krishna, you are listening to the number one Hare Krishna podcast in the world, the Late Morning Program. I'm here with Srimati, Her Grace, Govinda Dasi, Srila Prabhupada's disciple, senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada. I'm so excited to have you, Mataji. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
All glories to Prabhupada. So, for those of you who don't know, Govinda Dasi Mataji, she is immortalized in the Srimad Bhagavatam. If you've read the Bhagavatam, you will see that she's written there in the purports. Prabhupada has thanked her for her services. So I'm so excited to talk to you about your experiences with Srila Prabhupada, your experiences in the Hare Krishna movement. But let's start out with, how did you come in contact with Prabhupada, and what year was it, and how did you meet devotees?
Well, it was 1966, and I was a senior at the University of Texas in Austin, studying art and all the other garbage that they teach, regular BA. And I was searching. From the time I was very young, I was searching. I traveled in Europe, all over Europe. When I was 18, I studied art in Europe and traveled and went to many of the museums and cathedrals. And I was somewhat disillusioned with churchianity, Christianity as it's practiced. So I was a kind of a tepid agnostic. But looking at the paintings done with devotion actually carry a spiritual message. And I really believe that that's one of the things that helped me along my way, was going to all of the cathedrals and art galleries and looking at this. So then when I came back to the University of Texas after traveling in Europe, there was an incident at the University of Texas in 1966. It's the first incident that happened in America where there was a mass shooting. Now it happens every day, every other day at least. But this is the first time. People were shocked. Nobody had ever heard of such a thing. And it was very jarring to the students. I was driving to class. I had the police stop me as I was. And so soon after that, me and my husband-to-be, Gaur Sundar, left the university in search of a guru, in search of a teacher, in search of truth, because obviously the truth wasn't being taught at a major university. This is like, at the time I went to the university, the president's daughter was going to the school. So it was a prestigious school. However, and then, of course, there was the war in Vietnam was going on. There was all kinds of social unrest. But that really wasn't my concern. I had found a little book on yoga, a tiny little book. Nowadays, people think, oh, there's a yoga studio on every corner. Nobody even heard of that word, except maybe in New York or someplace.
Right.
Somehow or other, I connected deeply with it, and I started meditating. And on Thanksgiving Day of 1966, Gaur Sundar, Gary at that time, we drove away from the university. We didn't even know where we were going to go. It's almost mystical because we ended up in California, in Haight-Ashbury, right before Prabhupada arrived there for the first time. Wow. So I was doing my meditation. I know it's like many of the early devotees, I compare it to a lotus blooming, and flocks of bees just head for that, but they don't even know that that's why they're going there, but they're just attracted by the aroma. And so that's kind of how I always saw it, because we didn't really know where we were going to go. We were like discussing Canada, Mexico, California. We didn't really know when we drove away from Austin. We just kind of ad-libbed it, you might say. And when you're able to do that when you're 20 years old. So we got to California, and I was very turned off by the hippie scene. We weren't hippies. And we rented a little place near Haight-Ashbury, near the soon-to-be temple. And I continued my meditation every day in the forest. There was there's Golden Gate Park, where they have the big Rath Yatra. There's a number of beautiful forested parks. So I would just go and sit and meditate for 8 hours every day. And I had this little yoga book that said, when the chela is ready, the guru will appear. And that's, I guess, from the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And so I was not really realizing it. I was trying to make myself ready. We were already vegetarian. We were following principles. We were like already even celibate. You know, we were like, both of us were searching. So some time went on. We got there in December and January. And then in January, there was something called a human being. It was a big, they called it the Gathering of the Tribes. It was a huge event where there were thousands of young people, and mostly hippies and flower children and the whole bit. It so happened that Ginsburg was there. Ginsburg was promoting the Hare Krishna mantra. And we went, and I heard the mantra for the first time. I never heard it before, but somehow or other, I felt something. And then a few days later, in my meditation, I felt like I needed to find some clues. I went to a little bookstore. There were, in those days, there were hippie bookstores where they had very flashing, colorful things. And for some reason, it was almost like I was led by a rope, just led by a string in the heart, you might say, to a little card table with these very plain little booklets, mimeographed, that said "Back to Godhead." They were stapled together. They had no color. There was like one color, just extremely plain. And so I picked one up and started reading it. And it was about karma, samsara, all that, which already I was a little familiar with this from studying a little bit of Buddhism, from reading different things. I was familiar with that concept. And I picked up the next one. And when I picked up the next one, there was Hayagriva's article about meeting Prabhupada on the street in New York City. And the way it was written was so extraordinary. It was like painting a picture. He described him walking down the street in the early morning smog with pointy-toed shoes like a genie popped out of a lamp, with his saffron robes and golden complexion, smiling. And I don't really know what happened to me at that moment. I just know that suddenly I was transported into another reality, and I saw Prabhupada I'd been meditating, so I was familiar with the third eye opening and all that stuff. And I saw him, and he was beckoning to me. And I stood there in the store with tears running down my face, saying, I found him. I found him at last. I found him.
Wow. That's
how I met Prabhupada. And so then I looked at the address, 518 Frederick Street. Okay, that's a few blocks away. And I headed over there, and I met Hayagriva and Mukunda, and a couple of other devotees. And the temple had only been opened a couple of days. And they made an appointment for me the next morning. And there it was. It was like I already knew. I mean, from the moment that happened, I don't know the word for this. I think it's called a spurti. Later on, I found out there's a Sanskrit word, but that's only in the last couple of years. But it's very real. And if it happens, you're never the same again. It's like the most real thing that ever happens to you in your life. So wow. I already knew he was my guru. I mean, there was no question in my mind that it was just a matter of finding him. And so the next morning, me and Gary went to see him. And he was sitting in a little room in an apartment. Mukunda let us in. It was like one of those little one-bedroom apartments with a little bay window in San Francisco. And he was sitting, in a rocking chair. He liked rocking chairs. And he asked us questions. And he asked us, what have you been studying at the university? He asked many questions because he was studying Western culture at that time. This is 1966, remember? Well, no, it was by now it's 1967, January. Yeah, because we came right before the big Monte Rock dance. And that was, I think it was in January. Our first service was putting up flyers on telephone poles for the Monte dance. So that was, and so when we met him, he asked us many questions. He studied how Western culture was. At one time he asked my husband to be, Gorsaner, can you drive? Yes. He asked me, can you drive? Yes. Had a car since I was 16. Typical American. Can you swim? Yes. Oh, yeah. I was trained in swimming when I was 12 years old. All of these questions about the culture so he could understand how to promote the culture. His ISKCON.
Wow.
ISKCON wasn't really born yet. ISKCON was on paper. I think he had in New York in 1966, but it wasn't really much. This was his first trip to San Francisco, and his temple consisted of a little storefront that had been opened a few days before. So that's what happened. At the time, there was the Vietnam War going on. Now, my husband, Gorsunder, had left school, and as soon as you leave school, you're a sitting duck for the draft at that time. And he did not want to go. So a lot of the discussion that took place was about not wanting to go to that war in Vietnam that was just another political scheme. And so there was a lot of anxiety. He had a lot of anxiety around that. And I had anxiety as well because, I didn't want him to go off to Vietnam. But the main thing was that we were lost. We didn't know. We were seniors at a university and we didn't know what life was about. And so I told him that. And he said, I told him I've traveled all over Europe. I've studied here and there and all that. And he raised his eyebrows and said, oh, you're so young, yet you've traveled so much. And I replied, yes, but none of it has made me happy. And he got a huge smile on his face and said, yes, that is required.
Wow.
In other words, burnout. America, we've had it all. And nothing has really. So then,
well, one second. He was asking you questions about what you had done, like just normal things in your life, to understand what the young people were doing.
Yes.
That's amazing because he was trying to create a society and to preach in a certain way. So he was trying to figure out, kind of get like a temperature of what was going on.
Yes. Yeah, because you see, he came from India and it's a totally different culture.
Right.
And America, I was an average American girl. Of course, I knew how to swim, drive, was going to college, So this is, I think, one reason he wanted to know how he could preach in America, how to do things here in this culture, because his mission is to spread the holy name. His mission was Lord Chaitanya's movement. So every culture is different. I'm sure if you go to Italy, the culture is different there. You might want to have spaghetti prasadam. And you go to China, you might want to have noodle prasadam. It's sort of like that.
Right.
That it was like he wanted to know what we were like, what we were doing, what our life was like. So many things, so personal. Anyway, after all of this, like I said, a great deal of anxiety was there because we felt so lost, so confused. And Gorsinder was like, any minute he would be drafted. That's what it was like, any minute. At the end of this meeting, which didn't take more than half an hour or so, he was like, he listened to all the anxieties and then he gave his verdict. You simply come to my classes every morning and evening, and all problems will be solved.
Wow.
And we believed him. We believed him. We believed him. That was it. All problems will be solved. And guess what? He was right. So we began the next morning going to his classes every day. And we were initiated, within a week or two, we were initiated. And then he also said, my students you must get married. So he married us in front of the fire. And because in those days, people didn't, some people did get married, I guess, but we hadn't gotten married. The legal part wasn't it was the spiritual part that he wanted. He said, all of my students, if they live together, and I said, but we're not sleeping together. We're that doesn't matter. You have to get married anyway if you live together. So we were already together for about a year. So we got married, and then we went to his classes every day and he was there about 2 months, and it was a whole new world for us. It was like consuming. He immediately had me start painting paintings. It's very important. When people first become devotees, they have to dovetail their talents, because that way they get a taste. Their psychophysical nature. He wrote a letter to Rupanuga about this once, about the psychophysical nature enables one to get a taste for devotional service. So immediately he gave me an order to paint a big painting for the temple. And while I was painting the painting, my husband read all of there were only 3 books available then. The first 3, the volumes that he brought with him, the ones he brought in his trunk. I mean, most people have to understand. He brought a trunk of books and $7 to America at 72 years old. I mean, and started a worldwide movement. And
amazing.
Even today, when I go into temples, I'm still amazed. Even just recently, I was reading Shyam Sundar's book, some of the things that he did in India. And I look and I go, how could I have even known such a person? How could I have met such a person? I don't know. I certainly wasn't qualified. So that's what happened. And then we went with him to New York. Because we didn't have anything in San Francisco. We had no particular, after painting a couple of paintings, and Shamsundar carved the Jagannath deities, and Prabhupada installed them. And then he left for New York. And so we were like, well, can we go too? And he said, sure, come on. And so we found a ride with some hippies and drove cross country. We had an hour to get ready. And that's how we traveled to New York. And then we met the devotees in New York. It was a very different scene. It was more mature, much more mature, because they had been studying with Prabhupada for a year. Swamiji, he was still being called Swamiji at that time.
Right.
He was our Swamiji. He was not Prabhupada yet. That didn't happen until 68.
That's why I hear some devotees say, oh, this person's a senior Prabhupada disciple and that person is a senior but I think a really senior Prabhupada disciple is the ones who used to call him Swamiji, because it was such an early time. Like it was before Prabhupada even.
Yeah. Yes, he didn't accept the name Prabhupada until Boston. And the way that happened was that my husband by then he was by nature a scholar. He was studying Sanskrit and Bengali. He was doing the transliteration for Chaitanya Charitamrita. I was typing the tapes, and he was doing transliteration. And he was, you know how there's suffixes and prefixes in Sanskrit and in Bengali? One day, I was sitting in Prabhupada's room taking dictation, because that was my job. I took dictation of his letters. I mean, I spent 3 or 4 years in college writing really fast, so I could do it. So it was some use. I guess that's the only use of my college education, right? That I was able to take fast dictation. So Gorsinder came to the door and said, Swamiji, is it okay if I call Govinda Dasi Govindaji? And I said, and Prabhupada's Swamiji said, no, G is a very third-class form of address.
Wow.
So I said, third-class form of address? Well, then how come we're calling you Swami G? Well, that's not working. And so he said, oh, it's not very important. I said, oh, yes, it is important. It's very important. What's a first-class form of address then? Oh, it's not very important. Never mind. Not very important. Never mind. But we really don't want to call you a third-class form of address. So please tell us what's a really best possible nice name we can call you, if better than Swamiji. And he said, Guru Dev, Guru Maharaj, or Srila Prabhupada. And I said, well, that's 3. Just give me one. And he said, Srila Prabhupada is nice. I said, from today, you will be called Srila Prabhupada. And he was.
Great. Oh my goodness. I love that.
And so from then on, I was the secretary. We were in Boston at the time. Satsri was running the temple there. And that was in May of 1968. He chose that name. I did not give it to him. Some people say that. It's not true. He chose of those 3. If he had said Guru Maharaj, that's what I would have said. So he became Srila Prabhupada. And that was much better than Swamiji. And we all got used to it. And very incidentally, and this is kind of important, at the same time that he said, he gave the meaning of Srila Prabhupada. The meaning of Srila Prabhupada, according to him, is that the lotus feet at whose shelter all the Prabhus take shelter at his lotus feet. So you are all the Prabhus who have taken shelter of the Prabhupada. I'm the Prabhupada, and you're all the Prabhus that have taken shelter. So you should all call one another Prabhu. And so he had me, Gorsinder called me Govinda Dasi Prabhu. I called him Gorsinder Prabhu. And if you go back, you'll see many letters where, Dear Malati Prabhu, Dear Himavati Prabhu, Prabhupada writing letters like that. In the very early days, there was none of this Mataji stuff. That did not exist.
I'm sorry. I grew up with the Mataji thing in the 80s, so I'm sorry about that.
I know. Oh, I don't care. It doesn't matter. But unfortunately, the Mataji thing has taken on a lot of bad connotations because of the way so many women were treated. I didn't experience that myself. I was there at a different time, but other people did. But I can tell you clearly that what his definition of Prabhu is those Prabhus who have taken shelter of the Prabhupada. So whenever you say you're not a Prabhu, you're a Mataji, you just disenfranchised me. You see my point?
Yeah,
that's what you just did. So,
I see your point.
So I don't care personally, but and then I think also in Indian culture, Prabhu is used for a male, like the husband or something. And so that's not acceptable. they say, oh, a woman can't be called Prabhu. Well, you know, Prabhupada came from Indian culture, and that's what he said. And that's, if you want the proof of it, all you have to do is go back and look at all the letters he wrote. He wrote letters to Malati, dear Malati. And when he saw us, Malati Prabhu, how are you today? Himavati Prabhu, how are you doing? And the reason he did this, I have analyzed. This is my speculation now. None of this other stuff is my speculation. But you want my speculation on it is that this was an encouraging us to all treat one another with respect.
Right.
Treat one another with respect so that there wouldn't be quarrels and there wouldn't be the kind of division that we see now. You see so much division, you know. Anyway, that's my speculation, but
Wow. I'm sure a lot of devotees will be happy to hear this part of the story. You know, people fighting for the ladies to get their Prabhu, you know, suffix. So, thank you for sharing that.
Well, it's pretty well known amongst the really old devotees, and I mean, very well known. I mean, you'll find if you're around senior devotees, they almost automatically call one another Prabhu.
Right.
They were so used to it. That's all.
Yeah.
And then somebody changed it somewhere along the way. So many changes. I mean, it's just the nature of this world, you know. The book changes. Now that's a big one. The Prabhu thing doesn't bother me, but the book changes, that bothers me a lot because Prabhupada spoke those books. And that's what you have to understand. Those are his words. And the word, he himself gave the definition of Arsha Prayog. Arsha Prayog means whatever the saint has spoken, it's set in concrete. It cannot be changed. Right. That's his spiritual masters, Brahma Samhita, they wanted to edit it. There's a famous, you can find this on your database. And Prabhupada said, you cannot even change a period. You cannot even change a period in it. Wow. There's he said, Prabhupada said, there's the principle of Arsha Prayog. Never change the words of the Acharya. So there's a lot to be said for that situation. And now I think a lot of devotees are realizing that the original books are full. They're so full of bhakti, just like the original paintings. Like they took a bunch of the paintings out, and Prabhupada actually said, "Why have you removed those paintings? They were full of bhakti." And a painting can be full of bhakti, and maybe not as being an artist, not as technically expert as another one, but it's the feeling that comes through. And he loved the paintings from the original Krishna book. He loved those, and he loved many of the paintings because the truth is, we were like his hands. We were just American children. We were the angas and the upangas, the hands and the legs. It was his bhakti that was going into those paintings, his bhakti that was going into those books. It was not ours. We were just children. Right. We were very undeveloped.
I'd like to ask you on the subject of change. You have seen ISKCON from the very beginning until now. What is your outlook, or what is your opinion of what things, the good and the bad, and things have changed? How do you feel about it? Do you feel inspired, hopeful for the future, or do you feel like it's going in the wrong direction? Tell us a little bit about, because not many people have seen the things that you've seen. There's probably a handful of devotees who have started from the very beginning, 1966 till 2021. You know, it's like a very long time.
Yeah. Well, I'm an optimist, first of all.
Yeah.
Prabhupada talked about, you have to remember, okay, Prabhupada was living in tiny apartments We barely had money enough for basic things like rent and food. And Prabhupada would talk to me sometimes 2 and 3 hours every day, because I would take dictation, but he loved to talk and I loved to listen, about how he was going to have a World Sankirtan party. He talked to me about Lord Chaitanya's movement, how it would go to every town and village. He predicted so many things. I have no doubt that it's going to go on. None whatsoever. Whatever is happening right now, very temporarily in ISKCON, will be corrected in due course of time. That's my opinion. Yes, there are some serious problems. There's some serious things astray. But I think what we need to look at is the time frame. Now, I sent you several things today. I sent you things that he had said, right?
Right.
He said the whole thing will be finished in 50 years. It's about to be finished. And that's what we have to come to grips with. We need to realize what he was telling us. Prabhupada came to escort us to the golden age. He came to protect us and escort us and teach us. And right now, the world is, if you know what's going on in the world, and I'm sure you do, a crisis everywhere. And
When you mean finished, when he meant finished, what does that mean exactly?
well, did you read the things that I sent you about
Yes,
the banking, the fanking? The fanking will be finished. The whole thing will be finished in 50 years. What was the other one?
Pull it up.
There were like 3 of them that I sent you. You know what? I think I have to turn on a light. It's getting kind of dark. It's after sunset
please.
now. Can you
Please
wait?
do.
Let me
Yeah,
just
no
turn
problem.
on a light right quick.
Yeah. So there's. That's good.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you. So there was on
Maybe I
fanking.
should put one more light on.
Sure, you can put another one. Yeah. Oh, that's good. So there was the banking, the what's called the fanking, the artificial way of banking that will collapse. There's a
Yeah.
conversation
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's collapsing right now. You might have noticed. Did you notice the stock market in the last couple of days? It went 600 points down.
Right.
Yeah, what we have to understand is that what's going on in the world right now is, in one sense, yes, it's being driven by the Rakshasas. It is.
Mhm.
But in a higher sense, it's being this is the change. This is the end of Western civilization as we know it. And Prabhupada told us it was coming many times. When I was first with him, did you read my offering, my tributes offering? I don't know if you
I
had
did.
time.
Yes, it was beautiful.
Well, he would talk about these things a lot in those days.
Really.
Really a lot. He would, I mean, this is 1968. Okay. One of the things he would talk about was your paper money will be worthless, like toilet paper. Only gold has value, and silver, and grains, and land. This paper will be valued. Now, the gold standard wasn't even removed from the American dollar until 1971. But Prabhupada could foresee, and this is the point I'm making, he could foresee everything that was happening in this culture. He actually came here to teach us, train us, spread the movement all over the world. And he said many times in the latter part of his life, I have not completed my mission. I still wanted to do Varnashram. And he was focused on farms and devotees getting out of the cities. This is something he talked about so many times. And at the very beginning, when I was with him, of course, most devotees don't know a lot of these things because they were not recorded. We didn't have a recorder. My mother bought a recorder in '68, and that's when we really started getting recordings going. And that was in '68. But that was, we couldn't afford tapes for around, like later, everything was recorded. That's why we got the database. But Prabhupada talked about a lot of things that weren't recorded, but you have to hear them from Chutananda or Shamsundar or Brahmananda or Rukanu, like that.
Yeah.
And because we don't forget these things. I mean, when you're around your guru, you don't forget these things. They're very powerful. They stay in your mind. And I would walk in the room and he would be glowering and say, I do not very much like this Western civilization. Do you like this Western civilization? And what do I know? I'm like a 20-year-old kid. I don't know anything else. But he would tell me how the whole thing is going to collapse within 50 years. And this is recorded on the database. He's talking about the banking system, the banking. And one very interesting part is there's one discussion, and I actually have the dates of these so people can look them up. May 15th, 1973. He said, everything will be finished within 50 years. And this is 2021. By 2023. He also said this banking system will be finished. And he said that January 21st, 1977. So he said these things, and he some people couldn't handle them. There was a devotee who took over the service after me, who became his servant and his secretary after he sent us to Hawaii in 1969. He sent us to Hawaii in 1969 to open temples after having been with him since 1967. And then he came and stayed with us for a month in Hawaii in 69. Wow. That was wonderful. And then he left, and it was kind of like after that, everything just kind of took off with ISKCON. I mean, he flew around the world a bunch of times. It's very, very exciting because I wasn't there for that part. I love reading Shamsundar's book because he was. Right. Or another thing is these following Prabhupada, following Srila Prabhupada done by Yadabar and Vishaka.
Yeah.
So wonderful. You get to travel with him. You get to see him landing in the airports all over the world. It's so inspiring. In fact, my mother watched it every day for the last year of her life and ended up chanting Hare Krishna before she left. So
wow. How old was she?
101.
Amazing.
101. Wow. She left on Makara Sankranti at 1:08 a.m.
Wow.
She was special.
What did she think of when you joined the Krishna Conscious movement? Your parents, what did they think of the whole thing?
Well, of course they would rather I would be a normal American kid. Right. I mean, what is this crazy Indian stuff? But my mother loved me very much. And so she came to San Francisco in 1967, sat through several lectures and an initiation. And after Prabhupada did he would stop and put his shoes on at the door. It's customary. That's what he would leave his shoes at the door, and then he would come into the temple.
Yeah.
And he stopped to put his shoes on. And it's a custom in Christian churches that the minister stands by the door and shakes the hands of each person as they're going out. So she thought that's what he's doing. So she shook his hand and told him what a nice sermon it was. So,
Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
she's very fortunate. Yeah, she definitely was very fortunate. Plus, she bought the tape recorder that 1968 big you heard. I mean, back in those days, tape recorders cost a lot of money. It was a big you heard. It had 7-inch reels or 5-inch reels. And then I would record him every day singing. And then he would dub the drum over. I don't know if you ever heard, it's called the Vintage Series or the Harmonium Series. I would record him playing the harmonium and singing. Then he would have me put the tape on and dub the drum over it. And then he would talk about the prayer. You've probably heard this. So, people all over the world have benefited from her service in that way.
Wow.
So,
amazing.
So I was grateful. Yeah, very grateful for
Can
that.
you tell us?
But anyway,
can you tell us a little bit about Hawaii and tell us about how you're the first person that grew Tulsi in the Western world?
Well, I was always wondering what this Tulsi was, and when I would I would clean his room in the morning. Sometimes his beads would be sitting there, half hanging out maybe, and I'd put them back in, and they were just glistening, gorgeous, beautiful, golden beads that glowed with some kind of incredible spiritual essence. So I was wanting some Tulsi beads from the very beginning. I don't know if you know what the beads we were initiated with. This big red things. Have you ever seen pictures of them?
Yes, I've seen pictures.
You could slug somebody with those if you had a bead bag. They weighed 5 pounds. So anyway, I didn't like them. And I wanted Tulsi beads. And one time, me and Gorsinder were in New York. And we went to an Indian import store, and the guy assured us there were Tulsi beads. They were little dark brown things, right? And so we brought them back to Prabhupada and said, "We've got Tulsi beads." And he looked at them. Well, not Tulsi, but that was before I had seen his beads. That was really weird. Then later, when I was making his bed, I saw his beads. I knew what they looked like, but I didn't know then. So we were in Hawaii, and I had this desire, and Krishna knew that I had this desire. And so there was a lady with an import store, a British lady, and she was very sarcastic, actually, about everything about India. But never mind, I asked her to get me some seeds, and she did. She went to India every year. She had she brought things back. So I tried planting them, but they didn't grow. But we were like really sincere. We were bowing down to a blade of grass for a few weeks before we realized it. Before we realized it was just a blade of grass. It was just a weed, And so, I know. So then the second batch she brought grew. Their little heart-shaped leaves, and we were really excited. And then shortly thereafter, I went to see Prabhupada in LA, and I had one about this high, about 6 inches high, 2 seedlings, which is highly illegal. But anyway, I got him there, and I brought him to him, and he was so happy. It was at the time whenever there was a lot of trouble with, there were the leaders causing all that trouble in New Vrindavan. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but
sure,
we were in Hawaii. We didn't know anything about it. We were in Hawaii, so. In those days, there was no internet, no phones, almost no communication. And so his servant afterwards told me, because he talked for about an hour and he was so happy. He says, "I haven't seen him like this. I haven't seen him like this in months. He's been so disturbed." And, because of the politics. But when he was holding that Tulsi plant, he became totally enlivened. And I still didn't know the significance of the Tulsi plant. And the truth is, I didn't even know that he had put it in the Bhagavatam until I was reading one day, and I was shocked. I'm like, wow.
You didn't know that you were in there?
Nope, didn't know. Not years
Amazing.
later, I was reading, I didn't even know, it was like, I didn't understand. Try to see, for him, this meant I can introduce deity worship all over the world. That's
Yeah.
what it meant. Because
Yeah.
I was sending out seeds, I was sending out, he had me, I wrote a book about how to grow. And the way that I found out how to grow was I would go to the library at night to find books for my husband, who was a scholar. And there was a East West Center in Hawaii that had Srila Bhaktivinoda's books, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, so many books. And I found one called Furminger's Gardening in India. And it had the botanical name and how to grow. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. So I was able to
Wow.
find that. It's all Krishna's arrangement. I really didn't even know what I was doing. But I think that's true of all of us. We just went along with whatever Krishna provided for us, to do. But I think it's very important, and I really want to stay on topic so far as
Sure.
this is concerned. And the
Sure.
reason is that many, many people are really in anxiety and fear and concerned, and they don't know what's going on. Even devotees, they don't know what's going on. They're bewildered. They're living in fear of a virus or of this or of that. What we need to understand is we need to go back to basics and hear what Prabhupada had to say. He told us it's coming. He told us the economy will collapse. He told us the whole Western civilization will collapse. He made it very clear many times. I mean, he told me things that other people never heard, probably because he realized that Americans could not digest, especially young Americans,
Right.
could not digest the idea that there might be no food in the cities and the dogs might be running in packs and eating the people. But these are things he told me with my own ears. I heard them. And so what we need to understand right now that we are in a critical time. We are in a critical time. Devotees need to get out of the cities as soon as possible. I personally am concerned. I'm an old lady. I can go at any time. But I'm concerned for Prabhupada's legacy. I'm concerned for the devotees, for the children, for for things. Of course, it will go on because Lord Chaitanya predicted it, and it will go on. But there's the golden age. This is the dark passageway to the golden age. We're not saying it's bad. I'm not being negative. I'm saying this is what he told us was coming. And in order for the golden age to come in, even I found out Srila Bhaktisiddhanta talked about this too, how the Western civilization would have to be finished in order for the golden age to come in. And so that's what we have to understand, that this is what's happening. And it's happening in many different ways. Natural disasters, bioweapons, probably there will be a war. Prabhupada said many times, after the war, the preaching will be very good. And we have to understand is the cities are the focus of the depopulation, not the countryside. The cities are.
Are you still there? Looks like we lost you there. I was going to say Mataji, but probably shouldn't say Mataji. Govinda Dasi Prabhu, we lost you there. Are you still there? For those of you who don't know, she lives out in the wilderness, I believe somewhere near Texas, and she's using satellite internet. She's not even on normal internet. That's why her connection is a little looks like bandwidth a little bit less. Anyway, fascinating personality. She'll rejoin, I hope. But first devotee to grow Tulsi. She grew Tulsi and then she brought it illegally into LA to Prabhupada, and then he, she was sending seeds everywhere and growing, asking devotees to grow Tulsi and teaching them how to. Amazing. Okay, I think we have her back here. Okay, and you're back. No problem.
I'm back. It's my internet connection. I don't
Yes,
think
I
it's
explained
Google.
that.
It's not Google censoring, although it could be, but I don't think
It
it
was
is.
at the exact moment you were saying
I know.
Anyway, please
I
continue.
know. Like, oh boy, are they watching me that closely? I hope not.
Right.
I'm just a little old lady, you know. Anyway, Prabhupada told us that this was coming, and it's important for devotees to understand this. So many of them are bewildered. They don't know. They don't know what's going on. So many friends, families, they're being deceived, and there is definitely a depopulation going on. But what's really interesting is this: there is this one thing that I sent you today where Prabhupada talks about he talks about how long you can be cheated. And
Right.
one devotee says to him, "Oh, it's been going on from time immemorial." And Prabhupada says, "No, not time immemorial, just the last 200 to 300 years." So
Wow.
that's what's happening. The last 200 to 300 years, what happened? The Industrial Revolution, the fanking, the families that control everything, the wars, the Western civilization. And
So
that is
hearing Prabhupada's instructions from him and all these I can kind of like ominous things that he said, what do you suggest to the devotee community that we should do to I guess protect ourselves or to heed to
protect your
his warning?
children and the legacy. Protect the children and the legacy. Get books. I don't know if there's going to be internet that, after the war. Prabhupada actually said there wouldn't even be cars after the war. Get books. Get live hard copy books. Boxes and boxes of them. Get food. Store food immediately. You should be ordering rice, beans, all these things. And learn how to store them. Be a prepper. Get out of the cities. Get out of the cities as soon as you can, especially California, Oregon, and Washington, and those places. You should get out of the cities because the cities, all these things that he said, they went right into my, they didn't make me depressed. It didn't sound negative. It was just that he's saying that this is what's coming and I want you to be protected. And so he encouraged the farm communities, but the farm communities got lost after he left. So many things got lost after he left. So many of his projects got lost after he left. That's what happens. It always does in every religion.
I mean,
So what we need,
to play devil's advocate here, also, he said to preach in the cities, and he also established temples in the cities and things like that.
he
I mean,
did. He did.
it's not such a long time
He
ago,
did.
so how do you
In, 19,
reconcile that?
in 1976, he sent out a letter to all the temples that all of the householder couples should move to the farms. The letter was lost. The brahmacharis, yes, the preaching centers, he told us to do both. Toward the end of his life, he was talking regularly about getting land, getting farms. Look what he did in Mayapur, huge project. He encouraged the devotees to get situated away from dependence on modern civilization. Your oil civilization will be finished. Those are statements he made.
Right, I've heard that.
And your fanking system will be finished. All these things. We're so, and I mean, I grew up in the West. I don't know anything different. I've never lived on a farm, really. So but these are the things he was trying to do. And
Yeah.
after he left this world, there's money in the cities. They didn't want to move to the farms because there's lots of money in the cities doing the pick, selling books, so many things. And that's where ISKCON went astray. That was really where ISKCON went astray,
When
because now,
we didn't focus on the farms.
right, and now it's hitting the fan right now. Within this next year, you will see it. It's already happening. And and one of the things he also said, that this is recorded too, what will you do when your cities are closed? There was a devotee who was saying, oh, I've done all this big preaching program, and I didn't send you that one because I couldn't find it. But if somebody who's really smart can research it, where a devotee is saying he's doing all these big plans of a preaching projects. And Prabhupada's response was, what will you do when the cities are closed? He knew this was coming, and it is coming. The cities will be closed. Already look what's happening in Australia. So what we have to do at this point, we're not ready, but I would encourage all of the devotees right now, get out of the major cities, especially Los Angeles, New York, major cities. Try to find a place with like-minded devotees in the countryside, and store food and water and grains and grow a garden if you can. So I think that's one reason I'm still here. My mother has left me 160 acres of land. So I'm like, okay, I guess I got to figure out how to be a farmer now at 75. That is going to be difficult. But
Wow.
I realize that this is something Prabhupada wanted, and that there will be refugees. There will be people who don't have any food or any place to go. He said that too. He said there will be no employment, and they will all come to our farms, and they will become devotees because they will come to our farms. But that was when he thought there were going to be a lot of farms, but the lot of farms didn't manifest. And the ones that remained, well, Vrindavan is there, and I think Gitanagari is there. There are some really good farms in Hungary and Europe and India, I think.
Yes,
But
there are.
Not so much America, but it's really imminent at this point, within the next year for sure. So,
I mean, people could. I just want to ask you, what would you say to those devotees who are saying, well, you're I'm not saying this about you, but you're being a conspiracy theorist, essentially, saying these very, not so popular views on things. What would you say to that?
well, excuse me, these are not my ideas.
Right.
Prabhupada spoke them. He's the conspiracy theorist, not me.
Right.
He's
Right,
the
good
one that
point.
predicted all these things.
Right.
And if you don't want to, I guess stay in the cities then and see what happens. Nobody's gonna. A lot of people are gonna die. There's gonna be millions of people die. There was one saint in Vrindavan who said that by 2025, 75% of the world population will be gone. And it won't just be from war, it'll be from a lot of different things. Look at the national disasters that are happening. From the astrological point of view, you being Indian, you probably know a little bit about astrology, don't you?
Yeah, a little bit.
So you know what Sadhasati is. Every Indian in India knows what Sadhasati is.
Well, I'm an American. I was born and raised here, so I look Indian, but I'm actually American through and through. But I don't know what that is. Please tell us.
ABCD. You're an American-born confused Deshi?
Exactly. I didn't know that you knew what that was.
Of course I do. I've traveled with Indians. I know. I'm an American-born previous Deshi.
Right.
So anyway, what were you just asking me?
Sati.
Sadhasati means 7 years of difficulty when Saturn crosses over the moon. And there's a famous story of astrologers that Lord Shiva said, "Oh, what is that? I'm not going to pay attention." So he hid down in the earth for 7 years, and Shani couldn't find him. Saturn. Anyway, the point is that countries have times of birth just like humans do. And America has entered Saraswati, the difficulty, the 7 years of difficulty. And that has already happened. It's pretty obvious.
Wow.
With the biowarfare that's going on, with all the things that we've seen happen in the last year. The people are in difficulty in so many ways. And I mean, I don't want to get too much into astrology, but if anyone is interested, Patita Pavana, my godbrother, who was initiated in 1968, is an excellent astrologer. And he is in Bulgaria. He's an American. He's in Bulgaria. He predicted every bit of this in October 2019. I read his astrological newsletter. Exactly February 20th was whenever that was going to happen. I thought it was going to be a war, a bomb in February 20th, but it wasn't. It was the virus, which is like a war. It's like a bomb. I mean, it has the same effect. And so his advice to devotees, Patita Pavana said there will be mass poisoning and mass deception. And that was written in October 2019. You can go and find it. It's on the astrological newsletter by Patita Pavana in Bulgaria. And mass poisonings, you can see the mass poisoning going on. And you can see the mass deception going on also. It's intricately planned. It's planned so well that it's sometimes I'm so amazed at how well planned it is that only God could have created it. In other words, on one level, you can say, oh, it's the demons, the Rakshasas. But on a higher level, you have the Devas, the demigods who are under Krishna doing these things. They are actually taking orders. They are, the fact that Jupiter just moved back into Capricorn last week, the 13th. What has happened? The stock market just went down 600 points. The whole thing is being they're running printing presses 24/7, printing money so the money will be worthless. This is all a prediction of Prabhupada. I'm not saying these things. He said these things so many years ago. Now, if you go, you find people saying, buy silver, buy food. You find people saying that. But these are things he said 50 years ago. Yeah. So now we have to pay attention. And life will never go back to the way it was. Although it'll be different for different people. Some people, devotees, won't perhaps suffer as much as a lot of other people. But they do need to be aware that Prabhupada predicted these things. He told us to get ready. And ultimately, of course, the way that we get ready is to surrender to Krishna and chant Hare Krishna and keep the kirtans going. That's what I tell my friends. Keep the kirtans going. It's the only weapon that's going to work. No other weapon will work in Kali Yuga. Keep the kirtans, even if it's online. Even if the demons have stopped all the Harinams and all the churches are closed. You think that's an accident? Why are the liquor stores open, but the churches are closed? Think about that for a minute, Yeah. Why are there, this is not about a virus. This is a battle between good and evil. And the evil wants to take over, but it ain't going to win. But there will be some rocky times for 5 years or so. And that's, as I see it, Prabhupada is escorting us to the golden age. There's a choppy passageway, a dark passageway, but the time is coming very soon when the preaching will be very good. People will have lost everything. They will hear the message of Krishna consciousness. But it's important for us as devotees to hold that legacy, hold tight to Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet, hold on to Krishna consciousness, not get bewildered by the demon rhetoric, by all of the what do you call it, mainstream media and all the stuff that they're out there.
Yeah.
This has been done before. This is not new. It was done 100 years ago, in 1853, in England. There were forced, medical treatments that killed a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
They were forced in 1853, and there were laws passed in 1904 in America. There was mandatory, what?
Yeah,
So,
you know what you're talking about.
yeah. Well, I don't want to get into that too
Yeah,
much,
yeah,
because that is truly a controversial issue.
yeah,
And to me, I see, for one thing, the astrologers have said at this time is like right before the Battle of Kurukshetra. Some astrologers have also said that the stars haven't been in this position since 1423, at the time of the Tower of Babel in the Bible. Tower of Babel, they were trying to build a tower to go to the heavenly planets, and they all started talking different languages. I don't know if you know about that. You weren't raised
no, I
Christian,
don't.
probably. Okay, well, anyway, they're trying to go to all these planets, and they're all talking different languages. They're all
Right.
like bewildering. There's all this bewildering rhetoric that's coming out to confuse people, make people not know what is up and what is down. And we have to come back to basics. Don't listen to the rhetoric, listen to what Prabhupada had to say. And
Yeah.
what he had to say was, get ready, get prepared, surrender to Krishna, pray to Lord Nrsimhadev, and get land, get food, get water, and be ready for
Yeah.
the collapse of the Western civilization. Sorry
Thank
to
you for
bring the bad
no,
news.
no. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's something that's you find that it's important to share with the devotees. I see your emails and things like that. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about your role as a Vaishnavi in the Hare Krishna movement. I know, like you said earlier, you feel like there was some disrespect or some marginalization or things like that when it came to Vaishnavis in the Hare Krishna movement. Can you talk a little bit about to our newer generation of Vaishnavis in your experience of how you dealt with that, if you saw that or you felt that yourself? What would you say to the newer generation of women in ISKCON?
Hmm. Well, I listened to one of your podcasts once that had 3 or 4 different women
Right.
talking, and I was just astounded. That's all I could say. I was astounded. I didn't witness or experience what they experienced.
Wow.
What I experienced was completely different. My experience, I was never abused. I was never mistreated. I was never either by Prabhupada or by anyone.
Right.
It was a different world, completely different. And when I hear some of the things that are happening or have happened to women, I'm just like flabbergasted. I'm completely flabbergasted,
Right.
because all it's doing is it's causing so much. Prabhupada wanted a worldwide organization. He wanted people to chant and be happy. This is not how you chant and be happy. This is not how you raise children around ideas that are abusive. So I did not experience any of this. I did not experience the outrageous kind of humiliation. I just read something the other day by a god sister of mine. Her name is Ram Baru.
Yeah, I
I
had
had
her on the
heard her
podcast.
speak.
Yeah.
I had heard her speak, once in Houston, and I was so impressed by what she had to say. I thought, wow,
Yeah.
I'm glad I came to this festival. She was the best speaker in the whole festival. But then I
Right.
read something that she had written back in 2004, and I was so shocked and horrified
Yes,
that
I've read that
she
too.
went through. Oh, I
Yeah.
mean, I was like bewildering to me. And I don't understand. I mean, I guess there is no question that the dark forces have tried to undermine Srila Prabhupada's mission. That's just a given. That's what always happens. You have a great saint or son of God or a great personality, acharya, come to the material world and give wonderful teachings. And immediately, as soon as he turns his back or leaves, the demons are running around behind him, trying to mess up the road, trying to like destroy the path that he so clearly laid out. That's how
Yeah.
I see it. And I think that I think the younger generation sees a lot of this because a lot of them are a lot more evolved than they're much. Prabhupada was saying how the demigods are lining up to take birth in this movement. I'm
Mhm.
sure you've heard that, haven't you?
Yeah. Yes.
And it's true. And so from the children of your children, pure devotees will be coming out. That's one of the things that I'm sure you've also heard, haven't you?
Yes.
Well, think people are not born with the same mentality. Someone who is born with a higher understanding is going to see through things. And that's what's happened with a lot of the youth. They go, this don't make no sense. This is nuts. That's what a lot of them think. And they walk away or they run away or they turn their
Right.
back on it, which is really unfortunate because those are the ones we're waiting for, the higher souls to come in. I mean, we did the best we could. We were raised in a normal American culture eating hamburgers. What can I say? I don't know
Right.
about you. You're raised Indian. You're probably a little bit better. But
My parents are devotees, so yeah.
it's a very. Uh, I think a lot of these things are going to be. A lot of ISKCON will be changed. However, the picture that I sent you, the painting in my living room,
Oh,
I
beautiful
sent you a
painting.
picture. Okay, that is the dream. That is the Prabhupada. That is a dream I had shortly after he left this world. It's called the World Acharya. And I was
Yes.
told in the dream to take color notes and paint it. I don't know if you can put it on your screen or not. It would be nice if you could.
Oh, I could. Let
And
me try. Let me do that.
and what it is Prabhupada is sitting on a Vyasasan, and the whole world is reaching and pointing and looking toward him. And the devas are dropping flowers. And in the dream, there was like a close up. You know how a zoom in will go in, and at the base where Prabhupada's lotus feet are, and you can hardly see it in the painting, is in jewels, and in the dream is the word ISKCON. And in
Oh,
the
right.
dream, I realized that ISKCON is Prabhupada's Vahana, just like Lord Shiva rides a bull, Lord Ganesh, he rides a rat, Lord Vishnu rides a Garuda. ISKCON, unfortunately, it's in the dream was really sparkly, but you can only do so much. And the artist who did this painting, Satchidananda, great Russian artist,
Amazing.
ISKCON is actually an eternal entity. It's not a conglomerate of managers. It may look that way, but it's not. It's
Mm.
actually Prabhupada's Vahana for doing his work in this world and his books. And his books are the main thing he came to do. And that's why it's so important that we not mess with those books. We not alter them in any way.
Right.
It's probably the worst thing that has happened. Worst thing that
Really? You
things.
think that's
So
the worst thing?
absolutely, because it
Wow.
destroys the future. It destroys the movement for the future. It's the worst thing because Prabhupada often said, Krishna just told me, just go to the material. I didn't want to go, he said, but Krishna told him, just go there and write some books and come back. You know, you've heard
Yeah.
that, haven't you?
Yes.
Well, he wrote the books, he spoke them. I would sit out. Sometimes I'd wake up early in the morning and I would sit outside there was a curtain on the kitchen door, and I would sit and I would listen to him translating. These are his words. They're his words. How can you change them? How can you, as a conditioned soul, how dare you take those words and change them to what you think they should be? And besides that, Prabhupada had a great command of English language. I can tell you one time of a terrible thing that I did. I corrected him on something. Srila Prabhupada was going to go and the materialistic demeanor cannot possibly, you know, the preface on his record album, right?
Yeah.
So I typed it up, the one by his guru, ours, cannot possibly stretch to the transcendental autocrat. We all know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So I typed it up, and then he spoke it. He was practicing. So he had me type it, and then he spoke it a couple of times. He read the whole thing because he was going to be reading it for his record album. So there's one word in there, analogously. And I very timidly, respectfully said, Srila Prabhupada, I think that word is pronounced analogously.
Right.
And analogously, that's the American pronunciation.
Right.
And he said, you pronounce it your way and I'll pronounce it my way. And I never dared.
Wow.
Worm crawling out of room very quietly.
Right.
So the point is this: we don't correct our spiritual master, even if my intentions were good. My intentions were, oh, I want him to sound the best possible. But that's not the way it works. You just don't do that. And so I learned that in 1968. So I don't think some of my godbrothers have learned that. And I think it's unfortunate. I think maybe their intentions are good. We want to make it sound better. Just like I did. I wanted it to sound better, but you just don't do that. And aside from that, when Prabhupada was here, many scholars appreciated his books. They were greatly appreciated. And now some of those scholars won't even have they won't have anything to do with them because they are not considered authentic. You go and take them to a university and you tell them that it's been posthumously edited, and you'll find out that you can't do it like that, and not put the editor's name on the front cover. There are rules for these things, and you just can't do that. It's not done. It's unethical. Anyway, so that's my experience of trying to be the well-intentioned corrector.
Right.
You can't do that.
Right. So I wanted to ask you a little bit also about if you could talk to the besides the point about of what's happening in the world and things like that, your message to the ISKCON movement right now, what do you think we should move towards? I know you said farm communities and things like that. That's very extremely important. What else do you feel is important to say to the ISKCON society or the Hare Krishna movement in general? Because now it's with this online media, it's been even broke beyond the borders of ISKCON. Now it's to all other Hare Krishna Gaudiya devotees. So what would you say?
Chant Hare Krishna. Keep kirtan going.
Right.
Stop arguing. Just chant, because all of these petty, all these petty little arguments that go on. Oh, this. When the bombs start flying and the cities blow up, they ain't going to mean anything. But what's really going to work is the kirtan. Kirtan is the only weapon in this Kali Yuga. And you know what? We're so fortunate. Srila Prabhupada used to say, in the future, people will say that this Hare Krishna movement saved the world. And I used to wonder, save the world from what? Save the world from transhumanism. Save the world from horrible stuff that would otherwise take place. Yes.
Right.
The big plans, the great, you know what? You know what I'm talking about. Reset thing.
Right.
All of this was foreseen. All of this was a part of the destiny of this world. And this Hare Krishna movement has saved the world from this. And I only in the last year have I come to understand what Prabhupada meant when he would say this, that in the future, people will say this Hare Krishna movement saved the world. Keep the kirtans going. Never mind the politics. Stay away from the medical tyranny. Just keep the kirtans going. That's all I can say. And Krishna is going to, it's already in the works. It will, as Prabhupada clearly said, it will all be finished in 50 years. He said that in 1973. So add 50, that's 2023. And the astrologers say the same thing. Amazingly, it'll all be finished very quickly. So this is not negative. This is actually a blessing. It could be much, much worse if Prabhupada had not come and rescued the world. Much, much worse. Definitely.
Well, Govinda Dasi Prabhu, thank you so much for joining me here. I really appreciate you taking the time and coming here and sharing your story and sharing what you feel is important that for devotees to hear in this time in 2021. And I hope I can have you on again and we can talk about any other topics. But I just wanted to ask you, I'm very curious. You said your mother left you with 160 acres. So is that where you are right now? And you're trying to make that into a farm? Is that what's happening?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Wow. Do you have anyone helping you there, or you're?
New name is Sharanya. New name is Sharanya is the name I've given it.
Okay.
No, I'm all alone. I'm a little old lady, 75, in the middle of the wilderness.
Wow.
But I feel I'm sorting out estate issues, legal issues, and I keep asking Krishna, well, when are the people coming, did you say?
Wow.
So I mean, it's not what I would have chosen. I love Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii he sent us in there in 1969. And of course, I sometimes spent time with my mother. I took care of her for 13 years, flying back and forth to Hawaii.
Okay.
But it became obvious, what's happening in the world. So I recently sold my place in Hawaii.
Okay.
So that I'm here,
Okay.
And
Wow.
it's like I don't know how much time there is to actually put things together, but there are a few devotees, believe it or not, who have farms. Padma Garba has a farm in Washington State. Sadananda has a farm in Texas. I think there's a few other devotees who kind of broke away from the mainstream back many years ago. I think Nutama has a farm also in Washington State, Lady Anutama. So there are other devotees. There are devotees who have farms. Yeah. And that are already up and running. Mine's not. It's not up and running. But at least I'm not in the city. So I
Yeah.
think what has to happen is you just get out of the cities, band together with a few devotees who your friends, like-minded people, and be ready. You can always go back to the city if it doesn't happen, or if there's still the city is still there.
Right.
But
If
Prabhupada did say that he
no,
did
no,
say the
sorry. Yeah.
cities would be nothing but twisted metal and what did he say? I think somebody will have to find that on. I haven't seen it. I've only heard it from my brothers and sisters that he
Yeah.
said the cities would just be concrete rubble and twisted metal or something like that.
Wow.
I never heard that, but from him directly. The things I heard directly are the things that I wrote in my offering. The things that I heard directly with my own ears were there will be no food in your cities. The pet dogs will run in packs and hungry, they will attack and eat the people. He said this. Your cities will be bloodbaths. Your money will become useless like their toilet paper. It had no value. These are things I heard with my own ears when I was 20 years old. And
Wow.
I kind of filed them away. And now I'm seeing, at that time, America was a very rich country. It was
Yeah.
1970s. We were driving around in spaceships, big cars with fins
Yeah.
that got 10 miles to the gallon or something. It's a very rich country. So I didn't question him. I just listened and absorbed it. And now that I'm seeing how these things can actually play themselves out.
If devotees want to get in contact with you, could I share your email address with them?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to post it up on the
Prabhupada's
screen. Yeah,
Govinda Dasi.
it's right there on the
Yeah,
screen.
that's my devotee email
Yes,
address.
prabhupadas.govindadasi@gmail.com. If you want to get in touch with Govinda Dasi Prabhu, you can get in touch with her through this email. If you want to correspond with her or ask her anything about what she's discussed here on the podcast, it's here up on the screen. For those who are listening to just the audio, it's Prabhupadas, so Prabhupada with an S, Govinda Dasi, one word, @gmail.com. So thank you again, Govinda Dasi Prabhu, for joining me. I really appreciate it. And please stay. Do you have any last, any final statements before we end here?
Thank you for keeping things going like this. Your podcast is very interesting and it brings people together. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
doing this. Thank
Thank
you
you
for
so much.
making this your service. It's very valuable. Very,
Thank
very
you.
valuable.
Thank you. It means so much when a devotee of your caliber and of your history, and you're a legend in our movement, and saying that really means a lot. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So please stay
Hare
on. I'm
Krishna.
going to just turn off the recording. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Take care. Hare Krishna. Have a great rest of your evening. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.
Krishna, Hare